All right, good morning, Ada Bulldogs. How are you doing on this fine, fine Friday? It's a little bit early for me to record, so we'll see how the voice is holding up before my morning coffee. But anyways, just like your mornings at school, I have a couple of announcements, so make sure we pay attention to these children. First of all, you should be studying your vocabulary. Last week, I gave you your access to your Quizlet. So you should be looking at your vocabulary. At some point, we will actually have a vocabulary quiz. So you're going to want to make sure you look at that. Once I narrow down the day, I'll let you know ahead of time, a couple days what it should be. But study your vocabulary. And I don't mean like 30 minutes a day. Just look over them every day, every couple of days. Go back and make sure you know the ones that we've covered already. And you should be able to see those in the Quizlet and then know what note sets we've done already. Second thing, I know people have struggled with seeing the note sets coming up as assignments. I am trying to put it in the materials column, but Google Classroom has not been cooperative. I am guessing that's because there's so many people using it across the US at this point that it's getting overloaded. So that being said, if I can't put it in the materials, I have to put it into assignments. For whatever reason, the other day when we did one, I honestly tried to put it in materials, but then it wouldn't load. So I put it in assignments and it did. So whenever you do the notes, you do not have to turn them back in until I can get them put into materials, which I'll try again today. Then just assume that you don't have to turn in your note sets. They are for you. If you prefer just to listen to me and look at this and review with that, that's fine because I can't do a note check. If you're one that likes to have it on paper and write it out, there you go. So you've got access to that as well. So you choose, it's entirely up to you. Next up, your essays. When you guys have essays on your paper, I'm not Mr. Fain. I don't make you write out 5 paragraphs, which is standard for language arts. But at the same time, you guys cannot just give me a couple of sentences. You had an essay the other day and some on Joan of Arc, and some of you gave me like 2 sentences, and that was it. And that one was worth the bulk of your point. So, I'm giving you a certain amount of work. I expect a certain amount of time into it. So if you're just shortcutting it, then I can't give you all the points. That being said, some of you really need to stop plagiarizing. Uh, I want this into your own words. I don't want to cut and paste from the internet, which I can easily tell when they are. Somebody the other day just took the whole section of Joan of Arc from the book and put it into an essay. I'm going to figure out that that's not your own writing. So please just read the section, put it into your brain, and then put it on paper. That's what I want. I want to be able to tell it's a seventh grade writing, not somebody else's writing. Stay up on your assignments and do them at a good time. I saw somebody turned one in at uh, 4 o'clock this morning. Yikes. Seventh graders, you should not be up at that point. I'll try to drop these between 8 and 9 o'clock each day, and then you have like the whole day to do it. And then if you need to get up a little bit early, you still have like 11 o'clock the next day to get it done by. But boy, please don't stay up late. And going along with that, get outside. You've had a couple nice days here. I hope you're being able to get outside and have some fun and be a kid. And so get out and enjoy those days when the weather allows you to. Lastly, I've got a challenge for you on this Friday. I would like you to, if you want to, it's not for an assignment, it's not for bonus, because some of you guys are begging for bonus. It's a little early in the 9 weeks for that, but do something nice for somebody. I would like you to find a staff member of the school, whether it's cafeteria or janitorial, a teacher, an administrator, whatever. Find somebody and write them an email. You should be able to find their email addresses on the school website. And just send them an email and tell them you're thinking about them, and hope that they're getting through this okay. Honestly, they do miss you and would like to hear from you. So um, brighten their day, brighten their weekend. Send somebody an email. You don't have to get back to me and tell me who you did it. Just I would like you to do it if you want to. We had a student send us one at the high school level yesterday, and it really did brighten my mood. It was nice that the student was thinking about us. We really did appreciate that. So on the same note, I'd like you to do the same if you're willing to. All right, so enough of my babble. Let me get some coffee here to clear my throat out. Sorry for the slurping sounds. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a troubled continent. The title of your troubled continent has that because this is, let me get my little pointer going. There we go. A troubled continent because at the same time that you have the plague going on, you have a battle for boundaries, which we've been talking about lately. That you have England and France and others, and I'll pull these two down, fighting over all this territory that's available for them. Again, keep in mind that while you're fighting plague in one area, you've got, I mean, in the same countries, but then you've got people fighting over land. So if you don't get hammered on one side, you're getting hammered on the other side. And these would include England and France fighting, which is going to be the focus of our talks. And then the Spanish and the Portuguese are fighting against Muslims who are coming over because this is at the same time that the Crusades are going on. So imagine having to deal with a plague and so many people having been killed or dying or will be dying, and then kind of forced out to go into war against other countries who are invading or you're invading them. So that's going to be obviously problematic for everybody in Europe. So the focus that we will hit on is called the 100 Years' War. And there's an easy reason why it's called that because, well, it lasts a little more than 100 years, but pretty close. So the idea is that it's about this area in here, which the red is what we know as England today and all of like UK, Great Britain. We had a video the other day. And then France would actually be this area here in modern times. However, they get pushed down here because it says Anglo-Burgundian controlled, which would be England, and Burgundy, which are up here, up north. And then France is pushed down here. So that's the focus of the 100 Years' War. So it starts, and this is a question from the other day on your worksheet, was why did this all begin? And in short, it starts in 1337 because the English king, who was Eddie III, declared himself the king of France. Now, that's something that we would have been a key question in class is declaring yourself as the king of France is different than actually being appointed or named the king of France. So this is going to be a fighting point for the French because how dare this guy actually name himself the king of our own country. So if you look at him here beside his awesome pointy kind of beard thing, he's got a couple things that stand out. See if you can recognize what these are. I'll give you a second. So besides him looking pretty poofy in this outfit, two things that stand out. Number one is he's wearing a crown, and then he's got two crowns through the sword. So what do you think the symbolism is with the two crowns in the sword, or the sword ran through the crowns? Anybody? Bueller. Well, the idea is that it's artistic symbology, and it's showing that these are places that he has defeated. So, in other words, he has run his sword through two countries and taken over their crowns. And the other thing that stands out is this over here. Does anybody recognize what this might be from a movie? 1, 2, 4. 3, sir. That is from the, looks like it's from the Monty Python movie. That is the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch, if you do remember that one. I thought some people would enjoy that. So anyway, so here you have a long term of fighting between England and France. And it does say several centuries because, well, essentially it is. They really have been fighting since the beginning of time, and they will be, up through the 1800s when we're fighting our Revolutionary War against England. England and France are fighting too. So it's that constant battle for land rights of England and France right next door to each other across the English Channel. So again, the answer to why this happened was because of King Edward. So the French get angry, they get really angry, and they declare war, in case you didn't see that point. So let's talk about this. So a couple main points for this. There are really two that we're going to focus on. Three if you count the lady at the end. But you have this battle called the Battle of Crécy. And this is going to be your main battle for this 100 Years of War, this invasion of France by England. Now, I put this picture up here because it also references something else that we'll talk about, which will be the use of bow and arrows, which is a question from your worksheet the other day, kind of foreshadowing. Now, obviously, this is not the greatest picture in the world because it's not really accurate. You're not going to have archers way up front and a guy with a crossbow right here, and a couple guys looking like they don't wear pants. But your archers would actually be in the back, hitting from a distance, and then your knights would be at the forefront, or your infantry. So not really accurate, but it does show that something we'll talk about, which would be your archery. So this is Battle of Crécy. This is your first major battle of the 100 Years of War. And again, England attacking France. You can see from this picture here, here's the great king standing in the midst of the battle, wearing a crown on his head, which is kind of funny. They just shoved that over his armor. And obviously having the upper hand and bodies of knights displayed all around him. Not going to be accurate either. Rarely would you have a king who would go into the middle of a battle, because imagine if you're on the other side and you saw a guy wearing a crown on his head and armor, you would right away recognize that this guy was a king. So he would be like the one that everybody would focus on. So it's kind of silly that he would be in the front. Typically your kings would be in the back. If they got into anything, it was them at the end kind of finishing off people who might have already been hurt or tired. And so that way they can keep their bravery intact and show aldermen how courageous they are in this battle. But anyways, back to this Battle of Crécy. So this one starts when good old Eddie up there, wearing his crown on his head, invades France and defeats the French army. So this is going to be key, because what you're going to have is essentially the game King of the Hill. And I don't mean the cartoon. But if you've ever played King of the Hill, one person stands on the top of an elevated area or a hill, hence the name, and then you try to knock that person off. And so it's really like a back and forth battle. And that's what this is you have a back and forth battle between the land of France, between England and France. In this case, England gains the upper hand first, and they defeat the French at the Battle of Crécy, which allows them to end up getting their land from France. Now, I like this picture. It does show that you did have a naval battle here as well. I always think it's kind of funny just the way that these guys are drawn. This guy's doing a handstand in the water, and this guy got smushed between the boats, I suppose. Not sure how accurate that one is either. But anyways, so there's our King of the Hill. So France ends up being forced to give up their land, but they switch kings in the midst of this 100 Years War, which would make sense. And they slowly win this back. It's what you call a war of attrition, in that you gain land by the inches, giving up a lot, losing a lot of people in different battles, but you're not going to win everything back in one fell swoop. So it just takes a long time for you to be able to get back what you had claimed as yours. So the other part of this is the next guy, because this does go through several different kings and royalty. It's a guy named Henry the V, which would be Henry the Fifth in your Roman numerals. And here's a picture of Henry the Fifth standing regal. You can see his cape blowing in the wind, standing majestically with the sword and his head, the clouds in the sky. And you can look down here and see the other soldiers with him. I also like his bowl cut here. So even kings had bad barbers back then. But Henry V, he's your next king up with Eddie. Is that he is doing the same thing as he's trying to control northern France, as again, it's a back and forth war. And with Eddie, he uses his archers. And this is something that I wanted to focus on and ask you the questions about, because this is a change in technology. One of the reasons why we watch The Deadliest Warrior and talk about warfare in class, because technology can win you wars or battles. And in this case, it really did help Henry V, because he had better technology and better trained troops, whereas just having sheer numbers wasn't always necessary. So let's take a second and look at archers. And again, not talking about Luke Archer. But here you have, and if you watch the videos from the other day, they gave you several reasons why archery was important. So think about those for a second. All right, so the archery's been around for a while. It's not like the English invented archery. It's been around since like the beginning of time. They're using wood and string or animal gut or whatever to make these weapons, which are useful at a distance and still used in 2020. I have friends who go bow hunting all the time. Now, the bows of like you see in this picture versus what they use in modern times are a little bit different. But the idea of the weaponry is still the same, is that you're using this from a distance. So technically, this is artillery, that you can use it either like this guy in the foreground here. He's not shooting. He's shooting from a distance, but he's not shooting from far away. But you look at each of these guys back here. Look at their angles. That they are going to be so different that you can go shorthand here, or you can go a long distance. Imagine this guy's going off and up and down. So you can use it in a variety of ways, but these guys will be typically in the back and not necessarily armored. It's cheap. This guy's got like a little piece of helmet on. I'm not sure why he's even got that in case like archery comes and hits him in the head. I don't know. An arrow, not archery, but arrow. But these guys are in the back. So they're pretty useful. They're pretty replaceable. I'm trying to think of a better word than that, but expendable. That's the word I want. And you don't have to spend a lot of time training them. Archery isn't easy to pick up, be a master right away, but at the same time, compared to your other weapons and being a knight, it's not going to take so long. So it's cheap, it's reliable, so your bows are pretty trustworthy. It's easy to train people with, but you do have to be strong. And this is what they showed in that video the other day, is that you have to have good arms, forearms, and be able to have what they call the pull on it, and be able to pull it back, and especially if you're going from a distance rather than close up. But these have been used again for a long time. Some of our deadliest warriors have showed them for people on horseback. The Mongols use them. Native Americans have been using them for a long time period. Of course, it's across the ocean, but still at that ancient time period, nonetheless. And you could overcome many mounted French knights. So even if you had knights coming at you on horseback, these, basically trained archers could knock them off of their horses from a long distance and without a whole lot of work. Of course, you may not try to shoot an arrow right at the knight. Their armor might deflect it. They might not, depending on how good of an archer you are. And you just take out the horses too. So again, kind of making this stuff, the knights almost obsolete, because you're using this distance weaponry to take them down. So that might be a little bit better. Again, these guys would be in the back, and this guy should be wearing pants. But anyways, so in class, one of our discussions would have been about what new weapons have helped us to win wars. Being realistic, where archery has been around for a long time period, but it does become obsolete when you have gunpowder. And you can tell that by the Native American history, when they originally just used bow and arrows and tomahawks and things like that against the Americans, and then the Americans come out with guns, the Native Americans realize that they need to switch weapons. So I want to talk about briefly about what kind of weapons have actually helped us to win in wars or made a difference. And I'm not talking about like fantasy weapons, or in this case, it says a donkey anti-aircraft weapon. I'm not sure how effective that would be for the poor girl right there. Or this from a movie, not quite. But instead, like tanks and subs, I'm not talking like subway subs, machine guns, even elephants. When we talked about that with Hannibal invading, remember how much the Romans were scared by these elephants and how usable they were because it's just a different form of technology. The A-bomb, which is not a nuclear bomb, children. We have not dropped nukes on anybody. We have dropped the A-bomb, which is the atomic bomb. Anybody know what two bombs we dropped and where we dropped them? Trivia question. 3, 2, 1. We dropped them on Hiroshima and Nagasaki during the World War II. dropped them on Japan. And the names for those bombs were anybody? Fat Man and Little Boy, dropped from the Enola Gay plane, which I think is down in Dayton at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. But in the history of the world, atomic bombs have only been used twice. That's it. The United States uses them on Japan. Japan backs out of war. It helps to win World War II. And even jet planes. Not talking like regular planes, like you have like the biplane and such of World War One, but jet planes, which again, you look at what we still use today. Been around for a while, still used today. Been around for a while, still used today. Still used today. Still used today. Hopefully never use again, or the nuclear bombs. But anyways, technology does make a difference. And I'm not talking like stink bombs or dud bombs like that, or arming bears, or this guy. Trivia question, who is this and what's it from? 3, 2, 1. Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie Terminator. Actually, I believe it's Terminator 2. But anyways, the last thing I want to talk about is a lady. Now, I'll be honest, we have not talked much about ladies during this time period, and it's of no fault of mine. But now we are introducing someone who is a great role model for women, would be someone that you could focus on in terms of the advocacy of women's rights. Is a young lady named Joan of Arc. Now, you have in this picture several different symbolic representations. You have Joan right here in the front. You have this thing right behind her, and you have looks like some kind of a knight back in the back. So what do you think this actually is? You've got wings, you've got them floating on a cloud. Correct, it is an angel. So what this is symbolic of is Joan of Arc, kind of in this blank stare here, or she's focusing and listening on something, and this angel's really close to her ear, so acting like the voice of God, telling Joan of Arc to do something, and in the future, it's going to be helping the Knights of France. So the story of Joan of Arc is she was a young French peasant girl. Peasants are lower class, not very high up in the food chain. But she ends up persuading Charles, who's the Prince of France, to take back the North. Again, still during this 100 Years' War time period. So back and forth. She hears this voice of God. And again, she doesn't know anybody. She's not anybody that's important at the time period. She's a peasant girl. But she hears this voice of God. And it's telling her to go and persuade Charles to take back the North in the name of God. That God has told her that they would be successful. That this is something that she should do. And historically, we'll talk about several different people who have heard the voice of God. I can't say that it's always ended well for those particular people. One of which will be a guy named John Brown. We'll talk about next year in U.S. history. But anyways, Charles actually listens. She's very persuasive with him. She listens. In 1429, she's allowed to actually accompany Charles and the French army at the Battle of Orleans. Now, that's not New Orleans, like down in Louisiana. That's Orleans on the French side. And this is rare because women aren't typically allowed to go in, be a part of this. But Charles had faith in her. She had faith in God. She actually spoke to the army beforehand, according to there's several different stories on this. But anyways, one of the common threads is that she spoke to the army and said, believe in God, have faith. And then if you have faith, then we're going to end up winning this Battle of Orleans. And they do. They end up taking this city. And you could say that her faith was a rallying point for them as it stirred them to fight strongly. She believed that God was on their side. And you can see from this photo, and we'll talk about what this is here in just a bit, that she's wearing this armor. She's got this kind of halo on her head. You've got people bowing to her almost. And again, give me just a second. We'll talk about why that's important. But what happens to Joan is they do end up rallying. But what's problematic for her is she gets captured by the English. And she gets put in front of what's called the Inquisition. They had English Inquisition and Spanish Inquisition, and basically Inquisition, inquiry, there'll be a word question that's in there as well. And so what they did during these Inquisitions is that they would be put on trial for heresy, speaking out against the church or against God, according to these people. And she was not given any rights, things that we talked about with the Magna Carta, and she was told that she had to confess, forced basically to confess her sins against God. Well, being that she was such a strong believer, she said, I don't have any confession. God spoke to me. They didn't believe her, so they saw her as a heretic, someone who practiced heresy against the church, and she ends up being burned at the stake. And that is exactly what it sounds like, and you can see this picture here. She's burned at the stake as a heretic, even though technically she committed no crime, just because of their belief that she was speaking out against God falsely. And in 1920, she ends up being on the stake by the Catholic Church. So that's going back to this picture up here. That's what they're doing. They're not praising her in this picture, but they're praying to her because she's seen as a saint for the Catholic Church. And I think she's important today to talk about, because here you have a woman at the forefront who's rallying people, and again, peasant girl nonetheless, that shouldn't really have any rights or really been listened to at the time period, because it was the time period, not what I'm saying. And she ends up, according to history, rallying the French to win against the English and take back their land. And she's remembered as a martyr, too, on the side of the Catholic Church, because she died for her faith. So lastly, by 1453, the French do end up defeating the English. France becomes united and develops a strong government. Still will become a monarchy. They do not get their own democratic independence until after ours. So you have the French Revolution coming up in the 1800s, after we have our own. But anyways, there's your story of the 100 Years' War. Hopefully you enjoyed that, and it wasn't too long if you take away my 6 minutes talking at the beginning about announcements and stuff. It was only 20 minutes long. So have a good weekend. Remember, you don't have to turn in any of your notes. Your challenge too is to send out something to a staff member and just tell them that you're thinking of them, and perhaps if you miss them, if you do or not. And anyways, see you next week. Next week our topics will be talking about a guy named Marco Polo, looking at the Renaissance, different writings, which would be fun. I like that stuff, and I'll try to give you a couple interactive things on here too. So have a good weekend. Be safe, and tell your parents you love them. See ya.